And we're live.
And we've lost Naoise.
He'll be
temporarily,
back.
I'm sure.
Oh no, we've got him in an auditory form, just not visual.
I'm just getting the link to share.
Ah, good man.
I am prepared, and I definitely have everything open and ready to share immediately. It's not going to take me ages at all.
And I've already have the stream open so I can monitor the chat.
Awesome, great. I can just sit back and chill.
I
To those of you who might be tuning in, I don't think anyone is tuned in yet.
does it.
But we've we're starting it early to get our rambles and sorting technical issues out now. Oh, tweet just came from Naoise. We are live.
See, I'm in action. Working behind the scenes.
Yes.
But see, we still aren't technically live for another 5 minutes, so we're actually well ahead of schedule, doing so much better than usual.
Sorry, Naoise, schedule? We don't do schedule.
Well, yeah, no, because if we did a schedule, this would have happened how many weeks ago?
We've got it done in September.
Kinda.
Yeah, well, it's still September.
Just about.
And given that we did what was it, our May one happened in June?
Yeah. Time is strange in the she.
Time is an illusion, lunchtime doubly so.
Exactly.
So I've got a question which I want to ask Naoise once he comes back into the visual field, but I'll just hold off on it until then. Because I want facial expressions for this.
Oh,
here we are.
Okay, you good to be with us?
Kind of here, yeah.
Okay, so have you heard about this new Celtics film series?
I saw the name. I did not investigate further.
So I'll put it this way, Naoise. They blocked me before I'd ever heard of them.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw someone posting up on Instagram don't ignore anything to do with these people, and then I saw Stephen Hoggendice had been saying they'd been blocked by them, so I went on their Twitter because I hadn't been blocked by them to see what on earth are these things. Oh dear God, I thought at first this has to be a parody, but no, because parodies don't block people.
Yeah.
It seemed like a parody of right-wing America taking European folk tradition and making it racist and fascist, because that's what it is. But they're doing it in such a ridiculously awful way.
So what exactly are they stealing from us this time?
Basically our entire mythology, but they're saying that
it's
Ireland
so off the mythology that is okay, firstly they've got a thing apparently. Fionn is the Celtic god of battle.
No, continue.
So just things like that. So it's it's so far off. It's sort of taking the names and the aesthetic, but none of the actual substance.
It's weird how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their summary is about the globalist Roman Empire sending African soldiers to fight against the brave, freedom-loving Celts. And in their little trailer thing, they've got people standing against a bad green screen with the script here, just trying to cheekily check it, going, they're going to censor us and take away our free speech under the might of the Roman Empire. Yeah.
But no. You couldn't even wear whatever colours you wanted in Ireland. But just have free fucking speech. it wasn't appropriate for a commoner even to address a king, much less. You couldn't even talk about lockdown. You couldn't even leave your Tuatha's limits back then. It wasn't exactly a land of peace and freedom and free speech. Wasn't full of fucking libertarians either, though.
There were very specific laws about how you could insult people as well. Like, if you couldn't prove that your insult was undeniably true, that was a big problem. You could be executed.
Yeah.
You were just talking shite about someone, you could be executed. You don't talk like we back then. You thought that like words had power. You could actually cause physical ailments with the words you said. So free speech would not be given any leeway in Ireland.
I just love that even your bees couldn't be free. If your bee stings someone, you're liable for them.
Yeah.
We're more like than the Greeks, and that's saying something.
But I saw their logo, or their logo. It's written in Ogham. Now, it's in horizontal Ogham.
Yeah.
Which raises an eyebrow, but like that has happened in a few medieval manuscripts. There is horizontal Ogham in those. For those who don't know, Ogham is usually written vertically from bottom to top.
Correctly.
But in some of the medieval manuscripts, it's written sideways, so there is precedent. But I recognize what font they were using. There is an Ogham font.
Is there?
Yeah.
What fever dream came up with that?
Oh no, it's actually pretty good. It just lets you type in Ogham. It's not bad.
All right.
But because Ogham doesn't actually have capital letters, when you press Shift, it lets you type the proper vertical characters instead of the horizontal ones. So where they would have capital letters in their logo, they have the vertical characters, and the rest of the letters are the horizontal characters.
Right.
There's also the thing that like Ogham, it's not like a set alphabet or pictorial language. It's more symbolic.
It wasn't used.
It's not used like. It's not used the way we use an alphabet today. Or is this what I've heard? That's
a very kind of neo-pagan-y interpretation that it's like each letter symbolizes something. It was a phonetic alphabet. It sounds more than it is specific characters. It wouldn't really have had standardized spelling, and a lot of the markers that we'd use when writing Irish in like the modern day, like the fada, or even stuff in the pre-modern era like the shevu, they wouldn't be accounted for in Ogham at all. But yeah.
Doesn't sit well with me.
No.
So like what other bullshit are they spewing exactly?
Well, the whole thing about, the Roman Empire sending Africans and the traitorous Romano-Britons. And it's well, firstly, you seem to be mixing up the British Isles, Ireland, and the United Kingdom and Britain all into one big pot. The Romans never came here. It was too cold.
Bothered their asses. They decided it was too cold.
Yeah, too cold. And like, we've been dealing with these like nut jobs over here, and there's more nut jobs over there.
I think the opinion was that we were worse than Scotland.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to bother.
And like, just not worth the effort. We've got a lot of wood, or had a lot of wood, had a lot of trees, had a lot of cows, but they could get them more easily in other places with less rain.
The trees were actually part of the problem. The Romans were terrified of forests.
Yeah, because people can.
They know what happens when they go into woods. They lose their eagles.
Yeah.
And also, like, just the benefits of invading Ireland, not massive, but it's not like but also they did trade with us.
Oh
There's
yeah.
been Roman
Yeah.
burials found in here in Bray and up in Meath.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's not
very happy to
horrible Romans waging war against the free Irish Celts. It was, those imperial bastards moved next door. Do you think they've got anything nice like wine? I bet they do. Do you think they'd want some of our cows? They probably would.
Yeah.
Also around the time, and up until
We've
quite a
got-
late
We've got
period.
some people in the chat. So hello, Michael, and hello, Aoife. And
Hello.
I do like the way my hair is looking today.
It's very nice.
Thank you.
Is
This is my autumnal loads of blush look.
Yeah.
I had my first pumpkin spice latte today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd never
Lovely.
I'd never had one before, and I was like, this is actually surprisingly nice.
Hmm.
I was dubious because pumpkin and coffee, but it's mostly it's mostly cinnamon.
There isn't actually any pumpkin in a pumpkin spice latte. It's just the spices they use in a pumpkin pie.
Yeah, but it is also orange, very orangey for some reason. I'm assuming food coloring.
You can dye your green for St. Patrick's Day for some godforsaken reason. So
It should be.
I'd probably try one if it weren't for the fact that I don't really like coffee.
Yeah,
well, that's how I react to not liking coffee anyway.
killed Nisha. Destroyed him with decaf.
Yes.
Right.
Ugh.
So it has gone 7:30.
It
Oh.
has indeed.
We should probably introduce ourselves and get on to some stories.
I have a thing.
Okay.
I actually did a thing.
Oh,
Hello and welcome to the stream. We are Unlicensed Oral Arts and we tell stories. Every month we will bring you terror, tangents, and titillation. We have combed through folk and fairy tales, myths and legends, and even latrinalia to bring you stories that appeal to our warped minds. These can range from sweet and innocent to deviant and obscene, because here at Unlicensed Oral Arts, we feel that all stories deserve to be told. When we're not telling stories, we are secretly plotting to overthrow the capitalist system and replace it with a gay socialist utopia led by a council of communist witches, which we'll get right down to once we finish our crochet. If you don't know us by now, we are Emily, Nisha, Stephen, and sadly missing is Shannon. We believe that she's probably off hunting some sort of terrifying plant-like creature or doing her day job. It's one or the other. And that's our intro. It's also seemingly professional now.
yeah, we have an intro.
That's amazing.
We have an intro. That's amazing. Yay! Well, it's only taken what, a year and how many months?
Yeah.
There is probably a way we can just make a little video intro and have it play at the start of the stream.
Where's the fun in that? That sounds far too together.
So we have an intro, but we didn't discuss a running order. So who's feeling brave? Who wants to kick us off?
I may as well. I have decided to I'm winging this one. I'm telling whatever stories I know that come to mind from what we're talking about, apart from one which I've been vaguely working on, because I've been reading an awful lot about Finn McCool recently. I've decided that Finn McCool and the Fianna are really the best location to find weird, strange, bizarre stories, because bizarre shit happens in the later tradition all the time. But this one, it takes place around Samhain, so we're about a month from now. Finn and the Fianna had been at their hunting and fighting all throughout the summer. They were exhausted now, so they were looking forward to finishing up the year with a nice big party. Traditionally at Samhain, you'd spend around 7 days celebrating. So they went over to Scotland, found a nice glen, set up camp, getting the fire going, getting the mead passed around. But Finn McCool, as we all know, has every reason to be suspicious at Samhain because shit keeps happening to him at Samhain. So he decides he's going to take his favorite cousin / dog, Bran, and just have a look around the perimeter of the camp, make sure everything's hunky-dory. So Finn takes Bran along, they're both going along, and then just as they pass by a stream, they hear a snapping sound, look around, and across the stream they see 3 people. One of them is dressed completely in black, One of them's dressed completely in brown, and one of them is dressed completely in grey. When Finn spots them, they start walking over the stream towards him. As soon as they come up to Finn and Bran, they bow, and Finn asks them, "Who the feck are you? What do you want?" And they introduce themselves as Dove, Don, and Leah. Then they say that they've heard many great things about Finn McCool and the Fianna, and they've come all this way to offer their service to him. And he says, "That's fantastic. We actually happen to have a really interesting winter internship going at the moment. Me and the lads have set up camp about half a mile that way. We're about to get down to our party, but it's Samhain. There's many terrors around at night. We'd rather be able to party in peace knowing somebody's watching over us. So while we all get shit-faced, could you stay here and just keep an eye on things, make sure nothing dodgy happens?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine." So they've fallen for yet another unpaid internship. Finn McCool would have thought better of him, but no. Goes along to a tree, cuts it down, cuts it into 3 equal-shaped logs, and says to each of them to take a turn watching for the length that each log burns on the fire. He's then about to run off when he goes down to Bran and goes, "Actually, Bran, we know nothing about these people. They are Scottish. You never know. Would you mind just staying on and keeping an eye on them?" And Bran nods. So he says, "Also, my dog's going to stay with you. She'll keep an eye on things. She'll help you if anything goes wrong." So Finn fecks back off to camp to get drunk. And Dove decides to take the first watch. He puts his log on the fire, and he and Bran start wandering around the place, just around the perimeter of the camp. When in the distance, they see these little 2 pin. And Dove goes to Bran, "I was passing by here earlier, and I saw nothing over that direction, but what do you think we should check it out?" And Bran nods, so they go along the path, going through the undergrowth, till they come to a hill. There seems to be like a door inside the hill, and it's open and light is streaming out. So they go up, they peep their heads in, and they see just a huge party going on inside. There's tables with food on them, and there's thousands of people. There's people with cat heads, there's people with dog heads, there's people with no heads, there's people with heads in their bellies, there's people with multiple legs, there's people with no legs, all sorts of weird, fantastic creatures just getting down to party. And Dove spies this little goblet being passed around all of them. Now, there's no other drinks in sight, but the goblet goes to people, they take a drink and pass it along. And you notice it's going around kind of like in a circle pattern. So eventually it comes to Dove, takes a big gulp out of it, and as he's watching, it starts to refill with the wine that's inside. So he looks down at Bran and goes, "What do you reckon?" Bran nods. So they feckin' scarper. They run out the door all the way back to the camp, and when they arrive back, his log's almost burnt out. So he goes over to Don and kicks Don awake and goes, "Hey, Don, it's your turn to watch." So Don gets up, he goes to the fire, he puts his log on, and he goes off, starts walking around the perimeter with Bran. When he sees a light in the distance, and he goes, "Hey, Bran, that's a bit odd now, isn't it? Didn't see any lights in the distance when we were coming this way. Do you think we should check it out?" And Bran's like, "Yeah, no, we should obviously check it out." So they go back to the hill, but when they go inside, everyone's fucking arguing. There's mayhem. All the food's gone, and there's no drink in sight. Everyone's coming down from their highs. They're getting pissed. Someone's holding someone with a cat head in the corner as they're vomiting from the stress. And then this big, massive guy with 2 cat heads just stands up and goes, settle down. Look, we'll never find out where the goblet's gone, but look, we can keep the party going. We'll have some of this." And he takes us this big joint of meat. And he takes a big chomp out of it, and then it suddenly regrows even as he's eating it. So he passes it on to the next person. They're chomping down on this meat, and the party's resuming. People are getting back up onto the dance floor. Some of them are chatting. The person who was throwing up from the stress is now relaxed in this nice chair. When the meat finally reaches Don, and Don takes a big chunk out of it, watches it regrow, and then looks down at Bran and goes, do you think we should just take it? And Bran goes, "Yeah, no, obviously we should just take it." So they feck off out of the hill all the way back to the camp. When they get back, their log is almost burnt down. So they go over to Leah, they kick her awake, and they go, "Now, Leah, your turn to go and watch the fire. So Leah gets up, she takes the log, she puts it on the flames, and then in the distance, she spots this little pinprick of light, and she goes, Bran, that's a bit odd. Definitely didn't see anything when we were coming this way. Do you think we should go and check it out? And Bran goes, well, obviously we should check it out. So they go along, and when they go inside the hill this time, it's fucking chaos. There's blood everywhere. Cat heads no longer attached to bodies. Dog heads no longer attached to bodies. No heads now separated from bodies. It's all bloodbath. Everything is caked in blood, and there's just limbs everywhere. It's deathly silent. Looks like something serious went down. So as Leah's picking around through the corpses, they hear something in the distance. This irregular, like something heavy hitting on stone and dragging or scraping. So Leah climbs onto some corpses. Bran lies on some as well. And they're peering out from the corpses when the entrance to the hill is blocked and they see an outline of an old woman. She's got long, scraggly grey hair that sort of tendrils down. She was wearing a dark, black, ragged coat covering over her head. And she seems to have this one huge, long fang of a tooth in an otherwise gummy mouth, but it's stretching all the way down to the floor, and she's using it as a walking stick to support her weight. So she goes on, one chomp down with the leg, she drags herself forward, one chomp down with the tooth, drags herself forward until she gets to one of the corpses. She then sort of lowers herself down, grabs one of the arms that's been hacked off one of the dogmen, and she just starts grinding it along her tooth, just up and down in the sawing action. The blood starts spattering all over the place until she snaps through the bone. She then takes the bone and starts sucking on it with her gummy teeth, just sucking down the bone marrow, making loud, wet, snacking sounds. She then throws away the bone, reaches for another arm, starts sawing it up and down her tooth again. She keeps going around, snapping off the bones, sucking out the marrow of everyone in the place, until finally she comes over to where Bran and Leah are lying underneath the corpses. She lifts up one corpse, devours its bones, and then she lifts down for another. She lifts it up, starts scraping it along her tooth, snaps open the marrow. She starts guzzling it down. She then looks down, and Leah would swear that the old hag is looking straight into her eyes. But then slowly, the eyelids fall closed, and she just starts shaking ever so slightly back and forth, still leaning on the tooth. And she makes sort of sleeping sounds. So Leah crawls out from the corpses, looks at Bran, draws her sword, and just does one big swipe down the belly of the hag. The guts spew out as blood starts to pour. But then Leah sees things that look like hands just stretching out from the dismembered belly and just pulling the wound open further as they start to climb out a fully grown man dressed entirely in green. Then another arm starts shooting out and starts pulling himself out, another fully grown man dressed entirely in blue. And finally, a big, tall, strong man dressed entirely in red rips himself out of the hag's stomach. And it's a fucking fight. Leah starts trying to defend herself. Bran starts going for the shins, and thankfully, Leah is able to overcome both the one in green and the one in blue. She then manages to fend off the red man until finally she hacks off his arm and he scarpers. And she decides to head back to camp. Gets back, sees her log is almost burnt out, but at this stage, the dawn is arriving. So Finn McCool shows up. He has a look around, goes, this is good, looking good, lads. Party went off without a hitch. Got to tell you, I'm a real big fan of this new internship program I came up with. So thanks for all your work. If you ever need a reference or anything like that, let me know. I'll definitely vouch for you. If you'd like some compensation, I've got these Fianna dollars. They're good for Conan socks only, but you're welcome to spend them if you ever come to Ireland. By the way, I'm heading back to Ireland now. If I'm ever in Scotland again, I'll give you guys a shout. Thanks a mil. Well, by the way, did anything weird happen last night? And Dove says, well, actually, I went along to this hill and I saw this big feckin' party going on, and they had this amazing goblet that when you drink out of it, it refills with booze. And Finn says, oh, that's very nice. What about you? And Dawn says, well, actually, I found this hunk of meat that whatever time you take a bite, it refills. And Finn's like, oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. And Leah, what did you find? And Leah says, well, actually, I just found that they'd all murdered each other because you stole their shit, you two bastards. And then I had to fight for my life against this giant hag with only one big tooth and her 3 sons that she seemed to be keeping inside of her ancient haggard womb that burst forth fully grown. And Finn goes, well, that's useless to me. Giving me nothing. So, well, Leah, you could forget the reference. I'm sorry. But next time, try and do better on your unpaid internship. So Finn backs off back to Ireland. And by 2 years pass, when this guy comes into the camp where the Fiona's camping, and he's dressed all in red. He's only got one arm, and he goes, hey, I've heard about your great deeds, blah, blah, blah. Do you have any summer internships going? And Finn goes, no. Don't have any summer internships going. You'd have to wait for the winter internship. But tell you what, we've actually driven off one of our Fiona. He's far too handsome. The other lads weren't getting any action with him around, so we've got a vacancy. Would you like to join on? So the man joins on. He's with the Fiona for 21 years. It specifies very specifically 21 years. Till eventually he's done with his service. He tells Finn, look, thanks a mil. You've given me 21 years of fabulous employment. Tell you what, I'm retiring today, but will you come back to my house so I can cook you just a dinner and say goodbye? And Finn goes, yeah, I'll come along with you. So he leads him through the forest till they come to a bronze house. He brings him inside, sits him at a table. They start eating the food when the red man gets up and goes, Finn, you don't recognize me because you never met me. But do you remember when 23 years ago, you and some lads were over in Scotland and you met with these 3 people who were called Dove, Dawn, and Leah? Well, Leah killed my mother and my 2 brothers. So I'm going to kill you now. And Finn tries to get up off his chair, but he's stuck. And he goes, well, look, you've got me cornered. I admit they were acting in my service, did wrong. But before you kill me, would you mind if I just blew my horn? I love the sound of it. There's something really sweet about the melody. I just think I found it really comforting in my last few hours. And Red says, yeah, no, go ahead, blowing the horn. And Finn gets out the fucking door, Finn. He blows on it. And then the red one goes, oh, hang on a minute. You're not meant to let him blow his horn. When out of nowhere, Skjolon jumps on him and is trying to rip at his jugular. Quilcher shows up and starts kicking him. Conan comes up. The entire Fianna descend upon the bronze house, beat the ever-loving hell out of the red man. And Finn McCool swears to never return to Scotland.
And does he keep to that oath?
Fuck no. Finn.
Of course not. Because there's sort of a thing with like an Irish hero, anytime you're in trouble, you go over to Scotland till things cool down.
It's the only sane option. Bad things happen when you come back from Scotland, not when you go there.
Well, in the chat, Pootsy Doodle is saying that they have heard of worse internships. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't offer to pay them in exposure. We lost a Stevan.
They seem to have.
Yeah, they may appear, or they may have been stolen by the fairies. It's
they've been kind of phasing in and out of reality for the last while, I think.
Well, they do have a little changeling to look after.
That is true.
And a
They
cat.
do tend to disrupt electronics.
Yeah, and a cat, and cats are just
Naturally.
Oh, wait, I think they're back. They're back. Hey. They're back, but they're on mute.
Changelings.
Hey, we were contemplating whether it was changelings or cats.
No, just our router should get replaced. It does this every so often. It needs to be reset.
Wi-Fi fairy.
Yeah. No, the changeling we have here is actually quite polite and helpful.
Cats, then. I mean, cats are always up to something. I like cats. I just want to say, I don't hate cats. I just don't trust them.
No, cats are lovely. Just when you take a cat into your home, you have to admit the very palpable risk that they are going to try and smother you in your sleep someday. It's the price we all pay.
Yeah.
I really think if we ever introduce Casper to a dog, he will suddenly come to this immense realization of who he really is.
I feel like we should introduce Bunbury to Casper, because Bunbury at times I'm convinced is a cat. Casper seems to think they're a dog. So, we bring the two together.
They'll merge into one being.
One very hungry being.
Casper is always hungry. That's true.
Bunbury she's just a little bottomless pit. In her belly, there's a small black hole.
Casper will try to steal any food if he thinks he can get away with it. Molly will only try to steal turkey, but she does it all the time. She will try to take it out of your hand.
Yeah, Bunbury, if she thinks there's an opportunity to steal food, she will. She doesn't think about the escape plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't get that far to how am I going to get away without getting caught. Just, it's there. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Casper thinks about the escape. He prefers to do it when no one's there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bunbury doesn't have the patience for that. But
Dogs are creature instinct.
Probably stop talking about my dog, who is very cute. All my dogs are wonderful. And tell some stories. So I've got a story, which is, it's one you will probably be familiar with. It is a staple, and normally one that I would tell to children, but I've reworked it into a slightly more grown-up version. So here we go. So once upon a time, there were two sisters who lived together. And one was as bright and as merry as a summer's day, and the other one had all the scowls of autumn. But they lived together. They balanced each other out. And they had need of no one else. They cooked for themselves, cleaned for themselves, grew for themselves, danced and sung, and were happy. But the younger sister, the bright, summery one, she had a knack for finding where the wild things grew. She would go out at night and gather herbs and mushrooms. She claimed that gathering at night, the dew and the moon made them taste sweeter. But her older sister was always warning her, it's dangerous to go out on your own at night. There's things in the darkness and no fruit is worth that risk. Stay by the path, stay by the light. Don't listen to the voice that sings in the night. And most of the time, her younger sister would listen to her, but one night, as she was gathering herbs in her basket, she thought she heard something. The moon was bright in the sky, lighting her path, and so she went off with no fear. And the closer she got, the more she could be certain that they were voices, that it was laughter and music, and she followed the sound, and it led her to a field, and in the center of the field, there was a hill. And on the hill was a hawthorn tree, and growing at the base of that hawthorn tree were the most beautiful mushrooms she had ever seen. Looking on those mushrooms, she could not contain her longing. She went and she gathered them all into her basket. And it was only by the time she had got home that she began to think that maybe she might have made a little bit of a mistake. Maybe following the mysterious sound of disembodied voices to a hill with a hawthorn tree under the full moon mightn't be the wisest idea. But then she looked at the mushrooms, and when she cut them and cooked them, they tasted so good. In fact, they tasted so good that after that, everything else tasted like ash. Any water she tried to drink tasted brackish, and she couldn't get comfortable. Everything itched her clothes and her back. When she lay down on her bed, it was as if she was lying on prickles and nettles, and she ripped her clothes off, and all over her body were sores, little blisters popping up, and she scratched and scratched until they bled. And her sister asked her what was wrong, what had happened, but she wouldn't say. For a full week, she did nothing but itch, trying desperately to find somewhere she could be comfortable. No food could she eat, no water could she drink. And after a week of suffering, a week of her sister having to bind up her hands so she wouldn't tear herself apart, of having to force water down her throat, did she say what had happened? How she had heard voices leading her to a hill, how she had gathered mushrooms she'd found beneath a hawthorn tree. Now her sister knew what had happened. And so she got her own basket. She got the liquor that they kept for strictly medicinal reasons. She got the butter they'd been saving up. And she went off to make amends. She walked off through the night, looking for the hill under the full moon. And when she found it, she saw them. The good people, the wee people, the good neighbours, the gentlefolk, the fairies. All sizes, some so small that the grass only came up to their waist, some 3 apples tall, some 1/3 the height of a man, all of them leaping and dancing. She stood there, took out her butter, took out her whiskey and said, "Good people of the hill, I have brought gifts to make amends for my sister." And they looked at her and said, "We'll take the butter and we'll take the whiskey. And that'll pay for the mushrooms she took. But the insult done to us by your sister still stands." "How might I undo that insult?" "Her feet trespassed on our land, so your feet shall take away the sin. You must dance. Dance till the sun rises. Dance and dance all through the night. But if you stop for even a heartbeat, then both you and your sister are ours. We may take you away to our world beneath the earth, and we may do what we like. So the choice is yours. Leave your sister to suffer, or take the risk." And it was a great risk to take. Everyone knows making deals with the fairies, it's a dangerous thing to do, but what choice did she have? It was her sister. Her sister was wasting away. Her sister couldn't eat. Her sister couldn't drink. Her sister was being driven mad by the itching in her skin. And so she stepped onto the hill and she began to dance. The fairy folk, they took out their fiddles, their pipes. They played mad jigs, wild hornpipes, and she danced. She danced and twirled all about them. And the little people, the good folk, the good neighbours, they were constantly trying to trip her, to knock her up. But she danced and she remembered her sister. And though the blisters formed between her toes and pops, though the cramps formed in her legs, the stitch in her side, still she danced on, danced for her life, danced for her sister's life, danced and danced and danced until at last the sky turned pink, the sun rose, and all the good people were gone. And she made her way back home. She walked on bruised, bloodied feet. She found a stick and used that to help drag herself along. And when she came inside, her sister leapt up and embraced her, holding her close. The itch was gone. She could drink, she could eat. The love of her sister had saved her. And the 2 sisters, they lived together in that house, cooking, cleaning, caring and growing for themselves. But the older sister never danced again because her feet, which had taken away the damage, taken away the insult, undone the spell that had cursed her sister, well, her feet never healed. And she could never stray from the path. She could barely even walk outside her own garden. And that remained as a reminder, as a memory, the dangers of things that lurk in the dark. Stay by the path, stay by the light. Don't listen to the voice that calls in the night.
It's reminding me a lot of the Goblin Market.
Yeah, definitely took some influences from there. And that is actually the first time I have told that story. I've written it down for other people, but the first.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That was a very good telling.
Thank you.
Were you going to use that one in your Bealchina show?
I was, and I've actually submitted a script to the Scene and Heard Festival that uses that.
Excellent.
Nice.
We'll
Very
see if
nice.
anything. We'll see if anything comes of that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Seen and Heard usually are giving you a chance to get something on stage. I mean, they let me on.
And
All right.
I'm seeing someone in the comments that, you know, if we put Bushmills whiskey, okay, that apparently that's the whiskey of choice to bring.
Well, they have a discerning taste. Depends what part of the country you're in, though, because I tell you, you find it hard to find any Munster fairies accepting any sort of Ulster liqueur.
That's very true. That's very, very true.
What's that putching they have in 1661 that tastes sort of hazelnutty?
Puka Puccin.
Maybe it's the puka putching. I imagine that will go down well wherever you go.
Oh yeah,
It's
Puccin goes down wherever it appears.
So okay, hazelnut is the thing though, because it's the hazelnuts from the tree of knowledge that made the salmon of knowledge into the salmon of knowledge. So I've always thought, and I actually made this into a thing for an urban fantasy setting, but
Yeah.
You could probably make a drug out of those hazelnuts. Because like being bombarded with all human knowledge temporarily, that's one hell of a fucking high.
You could, like, it's like the total perspective vortex in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like if you're suddenly confronted with, like temporarily confronted with the entire wisdom of the collected beings in the universe, your brain's gonna blow up.
Yeah. Like in the film Dogma, the reason they have to have the Metatron is because like they got through 3 atoms before they realized that the pure voice of God would make their heads explode.
Yeah, I don't know how Phil McCool managed it.
I think by having the
apparently
confidence of a white man.
Apparently, Fionn is the Celtic god of battle, so that's why.
Yes, god of battle. There's nothing wrong with any of the terminology being used there. Not at all.
I just hope they get the Cursamaka.
Like, did you see the mural that was done in Dundalk, I think it was recently?
Of Lou, yeah.
Yeah,
Huh?
like, no offense to the mural. It's a beautiful mural of a character from League of Legends.
Yeah, 100%. Nobody, like, Cuchulainn, for example, is always drawn bare-chested. Always.
Have you been to Ireland? It's too fucking cold. His nipples would be punchier than the spire.
Well, maybe he uses weapons. Well, that's how you can tell that he is divine.
In Sky, but still, don't really think it's the most. I was going to say it's not the most practical option, but given that he has to throw the gay bulga with his toes while underwater, practicality has never really entered into his arsenal. Entered into somebody else's arsenal, though. Thank you.
They need to read the tone. Where are his 36 tunics at the same time?
And the 7 colors in his hair and the 7 colors in his eye.
Yes.
Cuchulainn looks fucking weird if you actually add up all his descriptions, and that's not even when he's going through his warp spasm. Like,
I love the warp spasm. Just the thing about the knees turning backwards. That's the bit that always sticks in my head.
That's the terrifying thing. That's what really makes him scary in that form. He's got fucking backwards knees, lads. How can we?
Is this the mural? Because that's what I've got for Dundalk mural.
No.
Bridget.
No.
That's a nice
It's
mural.
one of Lou.
That's the kind of style that I wanted it to be in. Because to me, like when you look at the early art, like say in Book of Kells and the like, it's more like curvilinear, it's more slightly abstract. And you can see a direct line from that up to Harry Clarke. Like, I wish Harry Clarke had actually illustrated Irish fairy tales rather than beautifully illustrating everyone else's fucking fairy tales.
Well, no one was paying him to do it.
He's an artist.
Is it?
That's the one. Like, Lauren put me onto it because she was browsing Reddit.
Yeah.
And like, it just doesn't know. It's not. It doesn't like he's too old for Lou. No offense to your man who's the model, but it's too old for Lou. He's a youthful guy.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Who else had a magic spear? Or did Lou ever lend his magic spear to anyone?
Lou barely uses that feckin' magic spear.
Yeah.
That's like,
hardly
the spear
ever.
fight is always associated with Lou, but in the actual the actual text, it's taken heavily from David fucking Goliath versus Goliath. But he doesn't throw the spear of light at Balor's eye. He uses a feckin' sling and a stone.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to get Igor on it, especially not poison Igor.
No. The Irish people deeply understood aesthetics. We didn't want to get blood all over our nice 27-layered tunics or on our weapons. Our weapons were too pretty to actually use. That's why we didn't like actually fighting all the time.
But
why you'd say, oh yeah, we'll just risk some of the guys in the ford with Cuchulainn. We're not going to get the whole army drenched. Can you imagine the dry cleaning bill?
As if Maeve would pay.
I'm sure Maeve offers all sorts of perks to the soldiers of Connacht.
No, it's like for her, like generosity is a PR stunt, so of course she's going to do it.
But she never has to pay. She just offers the friendly friendship of her thighs, and no one charges her.
And apparently, she can't get through the day without 7 rides. So, like, it's benefiting her as much as anyone else.
No one should have to go through the day without 7 rides. I mean, she has it right. It's just sensible living.
And now that we've got into suitably, I'm not making the face yet, though, guys. Come on.
No. Okay. All right.
I was giving the nice story earlier.
Okay. Right. I was going to tell a different story, but okay. We need to make Emily make the face. All right. Maurice Fitzgerald was the Earl of Desmond. One morning, he was out walking by the shore of Loch Gur, surveying the grounds, when he saw, gliding across the waters of the lake, a beautiful swan. And Maurice, a feeling overtook him. He'd never thought this about another swan before in his life, but something about this swan, something particular about this bird, made him desperate to fuck it. And so he started following the swan, carefully, quietly, from behind the tree line, as it swam along the lake, and it came up onto shore. And from behind the trees, Maurice watched it. And the swan pulled off a cloak of white feathers. And beneath that cloak, the swan transformed into the most gorgeous woman Maurice had ever seen in his life. And seeing this, he couldn't decide if he was more relieved or disappointed. But either way, he knew he was very aroused. And so he crept through the tree line up behind this woman. And he knew that she couldn't escape without that cloak. And so very quietly, he reached forward to take it. But just as his hand was closing upon the feathers, the woman turned, gently took his wrist in her hand, and she smiled at him and she said, "Oh, Maurice Fitzgerald, if you wanted me, you needn't have gone about it in such an underhanded way. All you needed to do was to ask." And so, roughly a half hour later, the beautiful woman was sitting upon the grass, wrapped in her cloak. Maurice was also sitting upon the grass next to her, his clothes in a bundle next to him. And the woman said, I must return now to my people, back beneath Naoise on the other side of this lake. I will come back to you in 9 months with our son, Garrod Irla, and you will raise him for us. And so she put the cloak back on properly and changed back into a swan and swam out across the lake. Maurice returned home, feeling in a haze. He thought to himself, surely this had been Anya, the queen of the She who live under the hill that bears her name, Knock Anya. And it seemed that she knew he would be there, that she had come just for this. When 9 months passed, she returned just as she promised, carrying a baby boy. And she told Maurice, this is our son, Garrod. I leave him with you to raise him. He must be educated in everything that befits a gentleman. You must raise him as if he were your true-born heir. And I will place a gesh upon you. If you ever react in surprise to anything that our son does, he will have to leave you forever, and you will never see him again. And with that, Anya left. Maurice never saw her again, and Garrod never met his mother until he was already fully grown. And Maurice kept the 3 promises he had made to Anya. He educated Garrod as befit a gentleman. He raised him as his own true-born heir. And he never acted with surprise about anything Garrod did. Despite the fact that Garrod, he far surpassed any other child his age. He had mastered horse riding and falconry by the age of 10. He could read and write better than any of the other children. By the time he was a young man, he had an incredible mind for politics, poetry, a deep understanding of history. And he was one of the best swordsmen in all of Ireland, the best rider. Nobody was an equal to Garrod, and some even thought that he knew how to practice magic. And one day, Maurice, the Earl of Desmond, was holding a party in honor of his son Garrod. And Garrod, he kept everyone entertained with his poetry recitations, poems he had composed himself of such technical brilliance, of such deep beauty that not a single person present was failed to be moved by it. And after the poetry was done, he discussed politics with the older people there. And everyone agreed that his views, the way he presented them, they seemed so reasonable, so obvious when he had explained them, that his arguments made so much sense that it was so hard to deny anything he said. And finally came the dancing. And there was a young woman at the party that night. Nobody really recognized her. She was clad in a green silken dress. And not a single woman there could keep up with her. She danced with vigor and grace all through the night. She didn't pause. She didn't rest for a single tune, danced through every single one of them. And of course, Garrod caught sight of her. The only person there who could maybe even possibly keep up with him. And the two danced together. They danced together through the night to the amazement of everyone. Their combined grace, their combined energy beyond anything anyone there had ever seen. But when they finished dancing, the girl, she offered to entertain the guests. And so she got up onto a row of the banquet tables and she started performing gymnastics, flipping and spinning and turning all over the tables from one end to the other. And one of the guests shouted out, "I bet you can't do that, Garode. I bet you can't do that as well as her." And Garode, taking the challenge, only smiled. He got up onto the table and did the exact same thing. Everyone was amazed. They applauded both of these two wonderful young people. But of course, Garode, he couldn't leave it there. "You haven't seen anything yet," he said. And so, doing a flip across the table, he landed inside one of the bottles. And after a few moments, leapt back out of it. Everyone applauded, and Garode's father even stood up and shouted, "I never thought I'd see you do anything like that." There wasn't a rush of wind. The doors didn't burst open. The room didn't darken. Garode simply turned to his father and he said, "You've broken your word to my mother. You were never supposed to be surprised at anything I did." And then Garode left. He left his father's castle. He walked down to Loch Gur, turned into a goose, and swam across the lake. He landed at Garode's island in the middle of Loch Gur. And there he lays in a cave, sleeping, waiting until he is needed to protect the country, only emerging once every 7 years to ride out upon his white horse across the sky. It's said that those who see him as he rides through the sky perish. One night, he landed and went to a blacksmith, demanding his horse be reshoed. He took the leg off his horse and handed it to the blacksmith. The blacksmith was very confused by this, but didn't want to anger this man. So he shoed the leg and gave it back, and Garode just popped it back on. And he said, "I can't pay you now. I can't pay you here. But if you come back home with me, there I can pay you." The blacksmith mounted the horse behind Garode and was carried off to Garode's island. And there he was feasted. He was given drink in silver goblets and a large sack of silver, which he carried home. And the people of Limerick are still waiting for Garode to come back forever. Even in Kildare, he is sometimes seen riding across the Curragh on his 7-year trips. But no one knows what need will arise that wakes him forever.
Where was he? Dwayne Cromwell came over.
Asleep.
Where was he during the Land League? Where was he during the famine?
He's a heavy sleeper. He's in the same dormitory as Finn McCool and King Arthur and Charlemagne.
Charlemagne and Genghis Khan.
Lazy bastards.
I mean, it's very soundproof, very good for deep sleep. Got those blackout curtains.
I saw someone suggesting once that those people who are all sleeping under the one hill have actually been taking it in turns to fix apocalypses.
In fairness, for all we know, they've been pulling some sort of like what's the name of it? Armageddon bullshit and fighting up and deflecting asteroids on the planet when we haven't been paying attention.
I know that. I mean,
For all we know, like there was a mecha Hitler underground that they managed to beat down. Like, it might be really busy, but as far as I'm concerned, a lot of shit's been going on up here, lads.
but we're still going against all the odds.
Yeah.
The planet
Remember
is literally trying to kill us, and we're still going.
Do you remember when it seemed like in the future things would get better?
No.
Right, someone in the comments, Pootsie Doodle, strange prequel to the Untitled Goose Game, but I'm here for it.
Oh God, that makes so much sense.
I was just thinking, like, oh, this is an alternative Lady and the Swan.
I was being struck by the Dawn parallels with the shoeing of the horse.
No, yeah, people. Dahio Hogan, in fact, has suggested that Garo Dearla is a representation of Down, which I kind of agree with.
I wouldn't be surprised if it probably is, but if he possibly was connected as a son of Dawn at some stage.
Oh well, Anya and Down are rivals.
Oh.
And yeah, we know that rivals never ride in Irish mythology.
Yeah.
Well, isn't there that thing of, there may be some sort of reincarnation, there may not be. Finn McCool may have come back, being born by
Mom gone.
We kind of don't really know what's going on.
There's also Down parallels with Ross O'Donoghue, and I think it's significant that both Ross O'Donoghue and Garo Dearla are Munster figures.
Yep.
I also think because Garo Dearla, he's half fairy. Yep. His mother's a she. And one of the Irish, the word Iarla means Earl. He's Garrod the Earl. But
or Gerald the Poet, if you're going Englishy.
But the word Iarla also bears a certain resemblance to Eirlish, which means changeling. And I wouldn't be surprised if the title of Garrod Iarla is a pun.
The old Irish love puns.
We love our puns. But the historical figure, he had an older brother who was passed over for the earldom because he had things that may or may not have been changeling-like.
Oh. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Well, in the Irish tradition of, you're not our version of normal, so you must be a changeling.
Definitely not relevant to my changeling video.
Yeah, definitely not. No. We never claimed that disabled people weren't people and then that we could do things to them because they were fairies.
No.
All right, okay. Kind of a sneak peek onto that video. I think the child substitution aspect of the changeling myth was actually introduced to Ireland by Christianity.
Oh.
And that the versions where it's an adult are the older Irish version. And that's why we get the circumstance of sometimes when a baby is saved from the other world after being replaced with a changeling, you have a small baby riding a horse. That makes no sense. I think that's the transitional period between when it was about adults and when it became about children.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like changing myth is definitely pan-European, so even if it didn't come in with Christianity, it's like there's nothing wrong with imported traditions. Some of the best ones in Ireland are imported traditions, but I think it is much more likely to be, your fairies abduct your children as well. Oh shit, maybe ours do it too.
Yeah. Because I think from what I can tell, the child substitution aspect of changelings seems to have originated with Christianity.
Well, they had the whole thing of no, you must get your child baptized or else, they're vulnerable to demons and spirits and fairies.
Yeah. Like the oldest recorded reports of child substitution myths are from Christian texts. I think the oldest is the Vita Fabulosa, which is about Saint Stephen.
Mm. Definitely could be. It's an interesting one though, because the child abduction by the fairies, kind of all the lore associated with that essentially contradicts a lot of the lore associated with adult abductions.
Yeah. And
like, you have to harm the changeling to get rid of it when it's a child, whereas when it's an adult, it will usually have passed away and doesn't require, like, they'll have gone through a suffering period and passed. There's a lot more crime and punishment aspect to it as well. Like, if you interfere with the fairies as an adult, whereas as a child, it just will happen regardless, which is tying into Church's love of determinism, despite the fact they proclaim free will.
The adult abduction version also has more in common with a lot of the pre-Christian myths and beliefs.
Well, the bride one, that's going back to Madeira time.
Yeah.
Whenever.
And like the dead hunt, and Down being the leader of the dead hunt, and people going to live with Down after they died. He was also notorious for taking changelings, or for taking people and leaving changelings.
Yep.
I just love the story about Down, when there's a guy who may or may not be a leprechaun with the Fianna, and so Fionn goes out of his way to try to find him a woman of the same size he can dance with, and the only person who knows is Down. He's sort of playing matchmaker.
Little black book.
Oh god, that's that makes so much sense for the character too.
But he's related to everyone. He knows everyone.
He's the equivalent of a woman of a certain age. Because
he's
I think
like a Jewish Yenta.
Once a woman reaches a certain age, she knows everyone.
No, he's the ancestor of everyone who dies. He's everyone's granddad.
Yeah.
He's a caring granddad as well, unlike some of them. Like, at least he wasn't supposedly forbidden from ever complimenting his son because his mother from a fairy world told him not to. Yeah, I'm sure, Morris, that's why you never went to his football games. You didn't want to be surprised when he got a try. Yeah, that's why
he could absolutely compliment him. He often did. He just wasn't allowed to be surprised.
Yeah, not so he's surprised.
Yeah, surprised. He could be surprised.
I won the game. Not surprised, son.
No, I know you did. Of course you were going to. What else was going to happen?
Obviously. Invalidating his achievements. But I do fear that we have not yet had the face proper.
No, I'm sorry.
No.
So I think I'm going to have to go into a massive medley of shite.
I don't know if I'm getting like inoculated each month.
Probably are. So we'll see what we can do.
Developing a tolerance to you guys.
Well, we'll start off with a nice medley of just basic folkloric material, and then if I feel like that's not working, I'll go into the Greek creation myth.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's going to get...
There was a man who lived in a village who had fallen in love with a very pretty young woman. Now, she was known to be, like, I don't want to shame anyone, but she liked to get the ride. So she used to sleep with a lot of people around the village. Like any lad who was kind of acting up and acting a bit tough, she'd kind of swoop in. But she seemed to have this strange debilitating effect on people that she slept with, because anyone who slept with her the next day, they just seemed like half a person. And they just went around melancholy ever since. Until this guy, one day he's kind of watching her chatting up one of these lads. And he follows them, and she leads them into her little hut. And as they're having sex, he hears the guy suddenly start screaming in pain. And he runs out, clutching his crotch, and there's blood streaming. So he goes back and looks at the woman, and she kind of palpitates out his penis. So next time that she's going to relieve herself, she goes to pee in the river. So he's there, and he's looking at her reflection. And as he's looking up, he sees that her vagina is actually lined with loads of teeth. So he's like, that's what's been happening. Everyone who sleeps with her is getting his penis bitten off by her vagina. So he decides, well, I've got a plan for this. So he starts acting like a bit of a toxic masculinity. He just starts going around insulting people, negging all the women, and she pretends to find this very attractive. So he comes back with her to the hut, and he goes, "Look, I'm sorry if this is a bit awkward, but I can't actually get my penis up in the light. Like if I can see it, I'm that homophobic. The sight of my own penis, massive turn off. So can we turn out the lights, please?" And she's like, "Yeah, okay." She turns out the lights, and she's there lying back, and she just starts feeling him going in, and she's like, "Okay, I'll just let him build up to it." So she feels like he's right there, like he's touching up the cervix, and she goes, "Okay, clench time." So she clenches down, but it's not coming off. So she clenches again. She keeps clenching and clenching, and she turns on the lights, and she sees that he hasn't been fucking penetrating her. He's there with a feckin' rock right up inside her. And she's been clenching so hard, she's broken all of her vaginal teeth. And he goes, "Now, if that wasn't impressive, I don't know what is. Are you going to marry me?" And she's like, "Well, I don't have any teeth in my vagina anymore, so I may as well. Don't have anything else going on." So he marries her. But now that she doesn't have any teeth in her vagina, she's still going around sleeping with everyone in the village. Like it's getting bad. Like one day he's there, he's about to go down on her. And as his like head is approaching vagina, he just hears a little "help me." So he goes in and he just parts the outer lips and goes, "What was that?" And he hears "help me." So he parts the inner lips, and he stares right through the vulva, right down the vagina, and he sees this guy's face. And this guy goes, "Please, can you get me out?" So he goes, "Oh, hang on." So he reaches in his arm and he starts pulling your man out. And he goes, "What the fuck? Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, sorry, I fell in. I was sleeping with her last week, and I fell inside." And he goes, "Oh, that's awful. How you've been in there for a better part of a week? Jesus, how did you survive on your own? How did you eat?" Goes, "No, it's grand. There's a whole community inside here. It's 10 of us. We've got crops growing." He goes, "Oh, this is interesting." So he just sort of sticks his head in and he's looking around, and they've got like quite a nice setup. Like you'd charge 100 and like about 1,500 for it if it was an apartment in the city centre. Like it's quite a nice setup. They even got a hot hob going and got beans toasting. But he tells them all like it's a bit awkward. This is my wife's cervix. So would you mind? So they pack everything up. It gets them all out of her vagina. But still, she's going around sleeping with everyone. So he goes like, "Look, seriously, I know that we didn't really kind of define the relationship before I broke your vaginal teeth and got you to marry me. But could you please maybe not sleep with other people? Can we try monogamy?" She's like, "Okay." She agrees to try monogamy for a month. And she stops sleeping with your man. And he's getting a bit like, "Well, this is what I wanted. Like, I kind of still wanted to sleep with, like, is his sex drive just gone?" So he starts watching her at night again. And he notices every night she gets out of bed and he follows her. And she's going out to the desert, and she's using a cactus to pleasure herself. He's like, she's masturbating too much. Okay, I've got a plan. So he goes and he gets gum and he sticks it to all the spines of the cactus. So when she puts it up herself, she can't get it back out, and she gets blocked up, and she can't pee anymore because people didn't understand anatomy back then. So she's actually getting so big and bloated from all of this pee that she can't release because there's a cactus blocking her vagina. And one day she comes to him and she's just like, she's sloshing about the place from the pee that's been trapped inside of her. She goes, "Please, I know this is probably you. You have a habit of messing with my vagina. Would you please mind taking the cactus out so I can fucking pee?" And he goes, "Okay." So he reaches in, he takes out the cactus, and just a big gush of pee comes out, splashing everything. It washes away the village. It washes away almost everything. And like at this stage, the world is actually being inundated by the pee flowing out of this woman's vagina. So much so that it floods the world until it's only those two left on the very top of a tall mountain. And they have to wait 6 months for the pee levels to subside again. And that's where we get the Pacific Ocean.
with a cactus? Also, ouch, banging into the cervix.
Hey,
You got me to make the face. You got me to make the face.
Could she not have gotten dentures?
Vaginal dentures, I don't think were quite in existence yet.
Like, all she has to do, if she knew Daedalus's phone number, I'm sure he could have arranged something.
He was already doing that to the duck's vagina, because as we know, vaginas are a maze. The development of duck genitals has been described as nuclear warfare during the Cold War.
Yeah.
Both sides building up and building up. Well, I'm going to get cul-de-sacs in my vagina. Well, I'm going to teach my penis to be prehensile.
You'd think they'd be extinct.
You think?
I mean, humans are still going, so I mean, and the amount of stuff we do.
We're very good at the old breeding, though.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many of us.
Some might say too many of us.
When you first started with the little hello, help me, I thought like the little severed penises had attained sentience.
No, she flushes them out afterwards. She flushed them out afterwards. She didn't want some random pricks just floating around.
She clearly did, though. She had some random pricks just floating around.
They set up shop. They were paying her good rent.
The thing is, when he's like in there, you know, seeing the little village that's developed there, she's just sort of lying back.
Oh yeah, she's just lying back.
Get on with it.
Yep.
What sort of, who are you talking to that's down there?
Okay,
I think
apparently this story has reminded Sam of a short story he read about a woman with a pinball arcade inside her.
Oh, excellent. I think a bowling alley would be more appropriate, though. Or a slip and slide.
Maybe I don't. Maybe just not putting infrastructure.
We don't.
I mean, I know it expands, but not that much.
Having any infrastructure down there. Like you already need a manual to figure everything out down there. I don't think it's a bit late to avoid.
No, you don't. It's very straightforward.
All genitals are not straightforward. They're all feckin' weird. Genitals are odd.
I agree with you. Genitals are odd.
There is a certain amount, like, you should be treating every partner like you're learning how to do it for the first time, because that's the appropriate way to figure it out.
Yeah.
But
and
like
ask questions.
Yeah, 100%. But like the basic mechanics are relatively simple.
If you're familiar with how to use Adobe Photoshop, perhaps.
I mean, I know how to use a mouse. That's all you need.
If one knows how to use a computer, then fair enough. I'm just saying it took the vast majority of the existence of humanity to come up with a computer. I'm just saying, as inventions you find out in nature go. It's not
the owners of said genitals figured it out pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
No one bothered to ask them.
You wouldn't be doing that. Waste of time.
Well, that has been the filth. The filth is covered.
Yes.
All right. With that, should we be wrapping up?
Yeah, probably no harm to wrap up now.
Yeah, we'll wrap up. But before we go, I think we haven't really had our good rant on Irish
yes.
representations.
Oh yes.
If I can kick
Okay.
us off, the whole Gerard Earla thing was reminding me of like the old English stock who came over and basically co-opted Irish culture.
Became more Irish than the Irish.
And
To be
Ireland-
fair, that was more assimilation.
Yeah.
no, I approve of it very much so. But there's this
Okay.
weird document that we found, that me and Lauren found when I was searching for something, called the Black Book of Hoth, right?
Oh.
Okay.
It's from an old English family who are lamenting some of the practices being brought in by Elizabeth. And in the kind of intro bit, there's apparently this whole segment where they go, of course, the Fianna were actually mercenaries that the Irish hired from Denmark, who'd come over to help defend the Irish population against outside invaders. And then they kind of make the argument of, much like we old English invaders are here to protect the local populace against these new feckin' English who are coming in. It's a wonderful bit of appropriation. It's wonderfully weird.
That's just slightly condescending.
Isn't it? It's beautiful.
Just the tiniest bit. I'd like to see their source for that thing about the Fianna.
Yeah, I am desperate to find this book, but I don't know how to get access to it.
Well, I've just Googled it, and the thing that came up was Ireland's Blue Book. That was the first thing that came up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might be slightly more difficult to visit, to find.
I'm pretty sure it's held in either Trinity or in the British Library. So
Cork University Press, the Book of Hoth, Elizabethan Conquests and the Old English.
Yeah, there's a book on it, but
Yeah.
the actual text itself, I have no idea where to come across it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe track down who wrote this book.
There's probably not any like publicly available translations yet.
Probably not.
All right. I think I'm having to blow up their name, so I might be reading it wrong. I think it's Valerie McGowan Doyle. So if you can find Valerie.
Yeah. I will contact Valerie. But then again, like, she might say where she actually got access this in that book, if I can get that book.
Mm-hmm.
But it's added
That's
to
fair.
the
That's true.
growing list.
Oh, we've got a question in the chat.
Ooh, questions.
Oh no, sorry. It's that they're saying to ask questions when involving in genitals. We've got a 20-second delay between us and the thing.
What are all
But
these
on
people
depictions-
doing living in here?
But on depictions of Irish media, people taking our shit, not representing it properly, using it for their own ends.
Yep.
Yeah.
I blame Yeats.
Of course, always.
No, yeah, of course. Of course. He was the one who started it. He was the one who went, you know what? These myths are great, but they could be a bit more fascist.
When in doubt, blame Yeats.
But I again go back to, I can't remember if we had actually started the stream when I was bitching about this, but it's the paucity of representation we actually have. Like, even if you just Google most of the figures of the Danann, you don't get any decent, like 90% of the image results are from artists within the last 20 years.
I can't even be angry that much when Americans get our mythology wrong. Especially Americans get it wrong, because most of the information online is fucking horse shit. Like, that's not their fault.
No, but it goes back, like, to me, it goes back to like the kind of the ricochet reactions we had against the literature over the years, and that the early days, when most of the now publicly available translations were taking place, it was deeply tied up with nationalism, deeply tied up with the vestiges of Victorian Puritanism. Mm-hmm. So you get horribly sent. Go on.
It was also like a very specific form of nationalism. It was like taking the nationalism we'd seen from other countries and going, yeah, we're gonna borrow that. Like that's what the likes of Yeats were doing. That's what like poor Pierce was doing.
Yeah.
Love a bit of Wagner.
Yeah, but it wasn't like it's why I'm very glad I learned the term romantic nationalism, because that's what it was.
Yeah.
They were doing romantic nationalism. Whereas, like, because romantic nationalism is the, like, our culture has never ever done anything wrong. In fact, the things it has done wrong were good, actually. And also, it is superior to all other cultures.
Yes, and we're going to have maidens dancing on the green.
Yeah.
Whereas,
when you combine that
just,
with the dehumanization of being England's first experimentation with colonialism, that, like, so the pervasive aspects of that are kind of hard to spot at times.
Yeah.
And that's the material that's freely available online. And there was a bit of a reaction against that in the 60s and 70s over here. But
yeah,
like Celtic studies itself, and I use that term in the broadest sense, like it's a self-enclosed discipline. It embraces lots of other like research methods from other disciplines, lots of other stuff from other disciplines, but it's very closed off. It doesn't seek to integrate itself with European studies or anything like that. We're still clinging onto that isolated island mindset, which to me is the fucking inheritance from British exceptionalism, as opposed to actually something the Irish would have reached. Like, we've always thought we were the shit. We just felt that we just had that beaten out of us for years, but we always had a connection to the continent.
Well, if you go back like to the Book of Invasion, there are no native Irish. It's just people who've come here and made this their home.
We're all fucking Scythians.
Yeah.
Every race that settled here was from Scythia.
For the majority of European history, the prestigious, noble thing was to trace yourself back to the feckin' Holy Land. You wanted to be, like, that's why the Irish wanted to be a lost tribe of Israel at one stage, because we wanted to connect ourselves to the Bible, because that's how you got prestige. Whereas suddenly you get romanticism, and suddenly out of nowhere, you're like, actually, never having fucking moved from the spot, never having learned another language to communicate with outsiders, and in fact shunning everyone who isn't directly part of our culture, that's actually a beautiful thing that we should celebrate. As opposed to, look at all this intermingling of traditions. Isn't it weird how this weird thing that emerged over in Israel was taken on in Ireland? Like saying that the first tobacco, like one of my favorite, like beautiful Irish legend that is can only come into existence through a meshing of different disparate cultures, is a couple of Irish lads over in the Holy Land watching over the Virgin Mother during her wake.
Yeah.
When they find the first ever tobacco plant. Oh no, she had a wake. They found the first ever tobacco plant, rolled it up and smoked it. And that's where the tradition of smoking at wakes comes from.
But she's meant to
world plan growing in the Holy Land with two Irish lads doing a tradition that doesn't emerge for another couple of 100 years. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but
what were you saying, Emily?
She didn't have a funeral or a wake or anything because she ascended body and soul into heaven, according to the story. So she couldn't have had a wake.
She had to have a wake.
Well, she would have been awake during her wake.
You couldn't be having any. You can't have anyone dying without having a proper wake.
But
made sure of that.
Okay, you're getting two different mythologies clashing.
But that's what it is. Like it's like the people, like when people try to find the pure original version of the Irish myths. Like I'm interested in that sort of stuff myself, but at the end of the day, what we have is the weird Irish take on previous legends they used to talk about. It's a very medieval take on it.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as a pure original version either. You don't have the pure original version of any mythology. That's a made-up concept.
Look at the Greek. Like the more you look into Greek mythology, the more you see it changing over the years. Like we're kind of like, I remember from my early days of classics, you get this vague impression when you're kind of dipping the toe in that, oh, well, they were thought of in this way during Homer's time. And then this is how they were thought of for the majority of the time. And then at the very tail end of the Hellenic age, they kind of got a bit all philosophical and a bit intellectual about things. As opposed to, no, it was constantly fucking shifting. You had people claiming that you couldn't eat, that it was healthy to bathe the pig each morning and you shouldn't eat green peas. Pythagoras, fascinating guy. Existing alongside Hellenic paganism. Like, it's nothing is static. It's always dynamic. It's always constantly shifting and changing.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Emily?
Well, I was about to say, there's sort of this very adolescent thing when you first start getting into fairy tales, like as a teenager, like, oh, well, in the original version, Well, there is no original version. And
No.
to me, the official version is whatever version is being told right now.
Yeah, like if you're looking at folklore specifically, part of the definition of folklore is that it's not official.
Yeah.
Like folklore can't have a canon. It literally can't.
Explode the canon.
There's more. Us telling the Red Sox story in the Leprechaun Museum is more folkloric than any of the texts that you actually find written down in the vast majority of our collections, but particularly Teecroft and Croker.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know for myself, I've never read, but before I started telling it, I'd never read the Red Sox story. I don't put most elements into my Red Sox story from what I've read. I picked them up from what other people have been telling around me, knowing the bare bones of the story. And there's bits you always have to include, like say, the death of Miach, when he's healing Nuada's hand. You always, like every text I've seen of that goes sinew to sinew, bone to bone. There's important bits of the text, but the important bits are the ones that survive down through different retellings. And it just, for me, there is this slight disconnect between, once you know about the Irish tradition, what you know is actually important and what are important elements, and what the outside American globalized view sees as important elements from Irish mythology. It's that big disconnect there because we don't know it as ourselves and we haven't continued it on. We let it crystallize into whatever it was when Lady Gregory wrote it down. And because like to this day, whenever I find people recommending sources on Irish mythology, she's first off everyone's lips.
Yeah, Lady G.
And that's no one's fault, because, well, that's not their fault, because that is probably actually one of the easiest, most accessible versions in English. They don't do translations into English anymore.
She is better than Yeats or Croker.
Oh yeah.
That's not saying
because she tells you, I have changed these. She focused completely upfront about it. I still wouldn't necessarily start with Lady Gregory, but she would be on the list of things to read.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeats and Croker just in the bin.
Yeah. I'd start with Elizabeth Gray's translation of the Second Battle of Moytura, to be honest.
That's not bad.
Then move on to Kinsale's Tawn. And then from there,
Over Nine Waves.
Over Nine Waves is one of the better literary versions.
I'd say don't go for the book. Go find some storytellers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sit in a pub with them.
All right. But we said we were going to sign off roughly a half hour ago.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Y word was mentioned.
It was.
We still have to do that special Slag of Yeats event.
You see, the more the more I realize we need to do more research so we can assassinate him from multiple angles. There's just so much.
Once the Changeling video is done, I am going to do a video about the fucking fight he had with Aleister Crowley, because it's fucking hilarious. Just the two of them.
Holy shit.
Did either of you see the series? I think it was on Netflix, The Irregulars.
No, I didn't look at it actually.
It was a sort of fantasy series about like Sherlock Holmes, Baker Street Irregulars, but there is an episode where they go to meet the totally not Golden Dawn, and there is totally not Aleister Crowley, and definitely not W.B. Yeats.
Oh no, I might need to watch it just for that.
Yeah. But we should say goodbye.
Okay.
Before we do, anything people would like to promote, mention, upcoming events?
One moment.
No.
I believe props are going to be involved.
Okay, so Bulgeen the Changeling is about to star in a video this Halloween.
Hello.
But as well as that, I have added Bulgine themed merchandise to my Patreon tiers at the 5, 10, and 15 euro a month levels. Once your charge has gone out 3 times, you will be getting either a sticker, a print, or a T-shirt with Bulgine.
Hello. And Bulgine's film debut is not the only thing happening at Halloween, is it?
No, it is not. Do you want to do it or will I?
I may as well. There will also be a certain show happening in a certain museum that we are associated with. We'll be Waking the Dead at the National Leprechaun Museum for the week of Halloween. So you can come along, experience the traditions of an Irish wake while hearing us tell horrific stories. Because it's Samhain. But I think that there are announcement videos and such on the Leprechaun Museum's social media. And I believe tickets are going on sale tomorrow or the day after.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. By the weekend, they'll be going on sale. So I believe it's the full week we're doing shows. I don't know the full details yet because that would be far too much planning.
Too easy.
But keep an eye on the Leprechaun Museum social media. I think my face is coming out in an announcement trailer or a trailer at some stage soon. I'm meant to go in and record it at some stage. So my face, be there. And do you have anything on, Emily?
No upcoming events in concrete form yet. I'm still doing the podcast. I need to get back into a schedule with that. Yeah. I'm in the middle of the telling of the Tone. Roughly every fortnight an episode comes out. He's at the Ford. I mean, it only took me 3-4 episodes to actually get to Cuchulainn.
Which is fair.
The alleged protagonist only comes in halfway through.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it?
Bless you.
Almost as if it was converted to be about someone that wasn't originally about.
Saw that. It's almost like all the bit with Cuchulainn doesn't really blend well with the overall themes of the rest of the story.
The thing is, I'm telling it, and like, I don't like Cuchulainn. I'm very open about the fact that I've got issues with Cuchulainn, stemming from his name and onwards. But as I'm telling it, because he's kind of not that involved, I'm kind of going, you're being weirdly stoically heroic. How come I'm telling you how come I'm making you seem heroic? This is not my intent.
Yeah. That's the problem with Cuchulainn. He sucks you in. You hate him at first, and you hated a lot of the things he does, but then suddenly he's crying over the boy troop sacrificing their lives, and you feel bad for him. And then he's actually being semi-decent to Emer and helping her out, and you're like, oh, don't like this. Don't like complicated depictions of people.
Damn it, and your nuance.
So I think that is what I actually really like about Cuchulainn is there's enough in there that he's not a complete and total waste of space like Cahor.
Yeah.
I almost think that if Cahor had nothing to do with his upbringing, he might have been a sound lad.
Yeah, I mean, Cahor sort of turned Ulster into this epitome of toxic masculinity warrior culture.
Mm-hmm.
If only he had listened to his mother and stayed as a puppet king.
The dude bros of ancient Ireland.
Now we do have to end this because we could get on to the round.
So we will endeavour to be back to you actually sooner than we usually are. So keep an eye on the page around mid-October. And we'll also have something fun planned in November.
And we might be turning up in an unusual place. You'll see.
Things are happening. Wheels are in motion. Things are changing. Faces will be made.
And with that, we bid you adieu.
Goodbye.
Oh, no, sorry, wrong button. Whoops.
That's the best way